Well, I got started in tennis in Santa Barbara, California. I had wanted to play tennis all my life, but I had never had the opportunity really to play. Since I didn't have a tennis racket, it made it very difficult. However, when I got to Santa Barbara on my vacation at the age of 30 years old, I was asked to play tennis by a professor at the university. And so I said I didn't have any tennis shoes and I didn't have a tennis racket. He said, "We'll loan you a tennis racket and you can play barefooted." So while I was playing this match with this foursome, the junior champion of Santa Barbara walked by and stopped and said, "Sherman, you look awful. You should stick to basketball." So I thought to myself, if he's a junior champion, I could be world champion. Little did I realize that eventually I would become world champion just because of this motivation. Yes, championship tournaments. I always dreamed of participating further in the senior division, and my first championship was in Pittsburgh, USA, Pennsylvania, and I prevailed, winning my first championship. From there I went to the grass courts in New York, Forest Hills, New York, and there I beat the perennial champion, Gardner Malloy, in the grass courts during the United States Championships. And since then I've won 90 national championships and I've been world champion 10 times. The motivation I get from tennis is that I'm inspired always when I play tennis. I'm inspired to play well. I'm inspired by the strokes and the physical condition you must be in, and the various things that make a player. And if you put them all together and you train and have a training program and you don't stop and think about motivation, you just are motivated each day to become a better player. However, a lot of people run dry on that subject because they lose interest, mainly because of injuries, or they may have other interests conflicting. But in my case, where I was an athlete to begin with, I felt that I'd found my calling. And so I continued to try to improve myself every day, looking for the truth, so to speak. And it happened to me. Once I found the truth, I was even more motivated. Once I found victory in the seniors, for example, where you are participating in with a class of people that of your own age, and if you were to compete against younger people, as time went by, you would slowly diminish your motivation, and you would feel defeated by younger people. But being in this division, each year you look forward to maybe being older, instead of saying, well, this is my last year, I'm getting too old, like the top players do get when they reach 30 years old. So to sum it all up, I would say the more you win, the more you're motivated. And the more you're motivated, you do the things you have to do to win. Earlier in this interview, I mentioned searching for the truth. And I went to great efforts to find out what kind of style I should play and what is the best styles, and that happened to be searching for the truth. And I found it, strangely enough, only about 5 miles from my residence was another tennis player, and he had a game that was absolutely spotless. His game was wonderful, and everybody that saw him play or played against him admired him and called him the best volleyer they'd ever seen. So I too was impressed, and I decided to emulate him. And by doing so, I probably improved my game about 25 to 50% in technique. That particular technique is not used in the United States by the great players or the coaches or the professional players. There's just a few people that do this, and I'm one of them, and I do intend to make sure that the rest of the world knows this style as soon as I can make a film to explain it. But this is what it looks like. The racket is tilted slightly, and when it's tilted, you call it a form, such as when you tilt it like that, that's a Western form. A Western. And when you tilt it like this, it's called continental technique. And when you tilt it halfway, it's called the Eastern technique. Eastern technique. And when you tilt it at this angle, it's called semi-Western. And that particular style is what the professionals use for their backhand and forehand, but I use it for everything, so that the racket is always beveled to this degree. And as you can see, when you hit the ball, it's always going to go over and straight, whereas the other styles you have to use the bevel, and that's called your own style, or it's called well, everybody calls it different, their style or whatever it is, but it's very difficult to play by ear and to create every shot by using the bevel as you play, and that's what most of the people do. They actually create their own shots and not knowing actually how this is formulated. Consequently, I have an advantage by knowing this style, and that I show you because you too could learn how to play tennis better, and that's the secret of my success. Well, longevity. I think longevity could be our genetic background in our family. Our family has had people that have lived quite a long time. Old age hasn't been a hindrance. They keep getting older and older. So I think that with the proper diet and lots of exercise, one can live as long as they want to live. And in my case, I like the idea of living longer because I enjoy life very much. Well, my father was a very strong man, physically, and I think too mentally, because he had to endure the depression and the many responsibilities he had for a family at that particular time of our growing up. And I think he did a fantastic job of supporting us and giving strength to the family. This kind of a minimal type of strength that just kind of just oozed out as time went by. And my relationship with my father was a very good one, in that when he said jump, I jumped. And when he said be home at 9 o'clock every night, I was there 5 to 9. In other words, I had great respect for him, even though there wasn't a lot of outward love or affection. but there was enough. You felt the vibes coming through at all times that he was behind you 100%. And I thought that made me very strong as I grew up and able to encounter the world on my own at all times. Selling papers on the street at 5 years old till 12, 13 years old, and working for myself, more or less. And my brother and sister were the same type of individuals. They were ready to go out on their own merely by the strength of my father's support, even though it didn't look like that he knew what he was doing. It just came out naturally. And of course my mother, who was the nucleus of the family, was the most important person there, because she was able to control my father and help him greatly with the business and motivate his actions and his life and make it pleasant to live a daily routine. If I was to advise a young man about tennis and what he should do with tennis, I would advise him to start young, try to be a good player by taking lessons, practicing diligently and regularly, and trying hard to learn the game first, participate in competition, and be sure to try out for the team in high school so as he can establish a ranking so that he could be eligible for a scholarship. And then if that works out, he goes on to college and he's looking at a professional career. I would suggest that he go to a college where they have better players and an opportunity to play better players from other schools, and eventually his ranking in the game itself would probably guide him further, and he would know from his own record and his own physical effort whether he was ready to participate as a professional player. And I further think that because there are so very few possibilities of becoming a professional player, he has the opportunity to continue his tennis regardless of how good he is in the senior division, where at any age he can participate in competition and test his strength and his position in the game.
So Bob, what's the strategy for the next
I don't have to look at who served last. That's the strategy.